Chapter 7 Confessions Ryan was allowed to use the bathroom and clean himself up under the silent, watchful eye of Jeff, while Jack explained his plan to Michael well out of earshot. Jeff agreed to let Ryan see Jeremy on the condition that he was accompanied by Michael and Jack. Jack led Ryan, followed by Michael, down to the basement where Jeremy had been restrained by Michael and Gavin earlier. As they made their way down the rickety wooden stairs in the darkness, Jack discreetly slipped on a set of brass knuckles, keeping them out of view of Ryan. As they entered the basement, they could see Jeremy. He had bruises covering his face and probably more on his body, judging by the way he was holding himself. He'd been handcuffed to a metal pipe that stuck out of the far wall and ran parallel to the floor before re-entering the adjacent wall, maybe 4.5 feet above the ground. It had put him in the awkward position of not being able to sit down without causing injury to his shoulders, so he was forced to stand or squat with his arms above his head. Ryan knew Michael and Gavin would have done that deliberately to prevent him from being able to sleep. Ryan had taught them that himself. When Jeremy spotted Ryan, his eyes lit up. "Ryan!" Ryan made a move towards Jeremy, when suddenly Jack spun around, the brass knuckles adorning his left fist connecting with Ryan's right cheekbone, and he went down. Jack followed him, leaning his knees on Ryan's chest and pinning him to the ground. Ryan saw stars, struggled for breath with Jack's weight on top of him, and faded out, not quite unconscious, but not physically able to respond with even the slightest of movement. His eyes drooped closed, and he heard Jeremy calling his name more frantically. He was aware of being gagged again. He could feel tape being smoothed over his mouth, crunching against his coarse ginger stubble. Jack grabbed his arms and hauled him roughly across the bare concrete ground, and everything felt like fresh pain again. The bitter metallic taste of blood reached his tongue. Michael looked worried, but made no move to stop Jack, instead pulling a pair of handcuffs from his pocket and helping to position Ryan on a chair and secure his wrists behind him to the sturdy wooden support post in the center of the room. Ryan's ears were still ringing when he was finally able to open his eyes, and he had to blink several times in the fluorescent light to get them to focus properly. Jeremy was struggling against the wall, still calling his name. "Jeremy, calm down," Jack soothed. "He's okay, see? He's tough. He's fine." He was overemphasizing the point, Ryan thought, before he realized why. Jack continued, "But he's here because of you." They were using his own tactics. Jeremy looked confused. "He hasn't done anything, though." "Lil Jay, he let you go against Jeff's orders. He stuck his neck out for you," Michael began, and Jeremy started to go red. "And then he hurt Gavin trying to get to you." Ryan could hear actual anger in Michael's voice at the mention of Gavin, and he knew he hadn't fully forgiven him. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm sorry. I don't want anyone else to get hurt." "Well, you better start talking then." Jack cracked his knuckles and glanced at Ryan, hoping the threat alone was enough to make Jeremy cooperate, while mentally psyching himself up to go through with it if it didn't. Ryan was tough, and he could be a real dick sometimes, so maybe, just maybe, he could justify it. "Who else do you work for, Jeremy?" Michael asked. "No one, just Jeff." Jack punched Ryan in the stomach, hard enough to make him react, but still holding back a lot. Ryan wheezed, and it had the desired effect. "I swear, Jack, I only work for the crew." "You sure, Lil Jay? There's no one else you're in contact with," Michael probed. "Who were you trying to contact when we found you? There must be someone else." Jeremy winced. "I can't tell you." Jack took a deep breath and twisted his right hand into Ryan's hair, yanking his head back. "Really?" Ryan shut his eyes and pulled back, trying to turn away from Jack, but the fist in his hair prevented him from moving. He knew there was nothing he could do to avoid the incoming hit. Jeremy screwed his eyes shut and tried to block it out, but Michael threw a quick jab into his stomach, making him open his eyes and gasp. It was just in time to catch Jack land a solid, sickening punch across Ryan's face. The impact rang out along Ryan's cheekbone, and he could feel it reverberate through his skull. The cold metal had glanced off his cheek and split it open. His own body felt far too soft, too fragile in contrast. Ryan was now a bloody, bruised mess. It looked worse than it felt, but only just. Jack and Michael both struggled to hide their disgust at themselves as they watched Jeremy carefully for any reaction. He looked shattered and terrified. It's Ryan. Please, guys. He's been a part of the crew for years. How can you do this to him? Michael had to turn away. He couldn't keep it up. He pretended to examine something on the other side of the room as he regained his composure. Jack, on the other hand, took the opportunity to turn it around. It can stop if you just tell us who you're working with and who your contacts are. I can't. He looked at Ryan, his bright blue eyes a stark contrast to his bloody, bruised face, pleading for him to tell them. Jack landed a hard blow to Ryan's solar plexus, and he wasn't expecting it. It sent him into convulsions. He tried to cough, but got a mouthful of blood instead, and with no way to spit it out, he spluttered as some of it sprayed out of his nose and ran down his face. He struggled to breathe through the spasms in his chest, and the blood, thick and sticky, in his throat and nose. You get one more chance, Jeremy. Jack grabbed hold of Ryan's hair again, yanking his head back painfully, tears squeezing out of the corners of his eyes. The tape gag had started to slip from the force of Ryan's coughing, and having lost some of its stick on Ryan's coarse facial hair and blood, he was able to discreetly begin to work it off. Stop! Stop it, please! Jeremy begged, finally admitting defeat and hanging his head. All right, yeah, I am a traitor, or at least I was. I was working with Funhouse, but I'm not anymore. I left them to stay here. I understand if you don't trust me, if you have to put me down. I get it. Fuck that, Ryan interrupted, finally spitting the tape off with a mouthful of blood, still spluttering. And by the way, fuck you, Jack, and fuck you, Michael. His voice was tinged with darkness, but it was offset by urgency as he continued. Jeremy, who was that guy in the alley? What? Jeremy looked confused. I don't... Drop the act. I already told Jeff and Jack about it. They know about Kovic and Funhouse and Matt. Then why... Some pledge of loyalty bullshit you can take up with Jeff later. Ryan's eyes narrowed. But the guy in the alley, you took his wallet from my pocket before you left. Who was he? I thought he was sent from Funhouse. There was nothing in his wallet except a card, Jeremy said carefully, shaking his head. I couldn't get an address or affiliation from it. It just said Shadow. Shadows? He momentarily struggled to attempt to pronounce it before adding, well, it was spelled like shadow, with LZ after it. Shadows. Michael's eyes grew wide, his mouth hung open with recognition. Jack and Jeremy looked confused. What the hell? Jack started before Michael interrupted. Shadows? Motherfucker! He looked to Ryan, whose expression mirrored his own. Jesus Christ, we need to tell Jeff. Who the fuck is Shadows? Jack asked in earnest. The bastard who framed me, Ryan said darkly, spitting some more blood. The memories came flooding back instantly, and he suddenly knew why he'd felt so uncomfortable being interrogated by Jeff before. It wasn't the first time he'd been accused of something he hadn't done. He'd buried the memory deep, as had the rest of the crew. None of them had been proud of that day. Michael's voice snapped Ryan back to the real world. We never told anyone about that. Jeremy still looked confused. What? Wait, you know this guy? Michael looked to Ryan, concern washing over his face. Do you think you can tell them? Will I go tell Jeff? Ryan inhaled sharply and nodded, steeling himself against the renewed pain of memory. Already he could feel his heart rate increase, his body going stiff as an instinctive fight-or-flight response to cold. Funny it hadn't kicked in until now. But Jeremy and Jack needed an explanation, and he knew he had to fight through it. It was the first time he'd ever spoken about it aloud, but it was almost as if he was back there as he relayed what happened to Jeremy and Jack. It was Ryan's first time in the field with the fake AH crew. He was temporarily replacing Jack on what was meant to be a training exercise. They were in a deserted compound, and the sun beat down hard as they trekked through the empty passageways, weighed down by explosives for testing and armed with heavy weapons. Michael scouted ahead with Gavin, and Ray had ascended a building nearby to scope out the area and get in some practice long-distance shots. Ryan tracked behind Jeff, investigating crates and crevices as they went. Jeff hadn't seen where the bullet had come from, but he felt the sting in his arm and spun around to find himself face to face with Ryan. Jeff, now temporarily disarmed, let out a cry and fled, frantically shouting, "Ryan shot me!" Ryan held up both hands, still gripping his assault rifle. "Whoa, Jeff, it wasn't me." Ray's oddly serene voice came over the comms. "All right, I guess it's Ryan." Ryan had no idea where he was, but Ray's skill with a sniper rifle meant he could already be dead where he stood. He quickly scanned for any sign of cover and started to make a run towards a nearby stack of crates and pallets. In agreement, Michael added, "So that's a kill on sight for Ryan?" "No!" Ryan desperately called out, to no avail. Without any warning, a round entered his right shoulder from behind, dangerously close to his neck, and exited just below his clavicle. Ryan went down like a sack of bricks. Eyes wide, mouth gaping, hands pressing to his chest where blood was now gushing from the exit wound. If not for the sudden urge of adrenaline, he surely would have passed out. The pain was so agonizing that he wished he had. No sooner had he hit the ground, a second shot went into Gavin's leg. Gavin made an almost animalistic noise before collapsing just in time for another bullet to barely miss his head where he'd been standing moments before. "Jesus, it wasn't Ryan!" Ray shouted above the din that had erupted of gunfire, smoke bombs, and confusion. "Who is that? Who the fuck is that?" Ryan could hear Jeff shouting and shooting at someone. "Someone else is here?" Michael asked incredulously. "How the fuck did that happen?" "Whoever he is, he's good," Ray confirmed. "I can't get a shot on him." Ryan was phasing in and out of consciousness, snatching fragments of conversation. "Michael, help me," Gavin was begging. Michael, the hero he was by Gavin's side in an instant. "I'm here for you, Gav. I got you." "Where the fuck did he go?" screamed Jeff. Ray sounded rattled over the comms. "I don't know. I lost him. Jesus, where the fuck—" There was a grunt from Ray, and he suddenly went silent. "Ray?" Michael left Gavin with Jeff and jumped to his feet to climb where Ray had been sniping. Even though Ryan had just been what might have been fatally shot by him, his heart was in his throat as he awaited confirmation that Ray was okay, or, he dreaded to think, dead. "Ray? Ray!" Michael's cries were becoming more frantic as the crew on the ground could only listen and wait. "Ray! Oh, thank fuck! He's not dead. He's unconscious, but he's breathing." The team let out a collective exhale at the news. Michael went on. "There's something here. A card. It just says Shadles." There was a brief confusion as the crew wondered what the hell that meant, before Jeff came to the sudden and uncomfortable realization that he had condemned Ryan. "Oh shit! Ryan! Buddy! Stay with me!" Jeff rushed to his side, temporarily forgetting about his own injuries. "Michael, call for evac. We need to get him to a hospital." Ryan couldn't remember much more after that, except the looming feeling of guilt in the room every time he walked in, every time he took off his shirt and they caught a glimpse of the scars they knew they inflicted. Ryan had been shaken by how quickly they had turned on him. All it had taken was a word from Jeff. He kept his guard up for a long time afterwards. They never caught the guy responsible, Shadles. The whole crew swore that if they ever got their hands on him, they'd burn him alive. But the secret stayed with them. They never even worked up the nerve to tell Jack.